Hello, my name is Devereaux, and this is the context of the Leviathan, a philosophical, historical, and creative analysis of the infamous sea monster. Of all the mythical beasts conceived, there are few that are recognizable like the Leviathan. Known for its immeasurable size and powerful nature, however, we know very little about the scale of the Leviathan's impact. In this capstone project, we will analyze the Leviathan's various interpretations. We will first discuss the Leviathan in the philosophy of Thomas Hobbes. Next, we will observe the Leviathan through the lens of history. And lastly, combining the two, we will provide renditions of the Leviathan by illustrating it according to Hobbesian philosophy and art history, as well as a third illustration in synthesis of the previous two. The Leviathan is more than a massive beast, for the scale of its influence has also impacted history. Let's first review what Leviathan is according to Thomas Hobbes. Right after Hobbes witnessed the English Civil War from 1642 to 1651, he reflected on society and philosophy to write his book, Leviathan. Here in Chapter 30 of the Office of the Sovereign Representative, Hobbes summarizes his work that people should trust the sovereign with the power to the procuration of the safety of the people, to which is obliged by law of nature, and to render an account thereof to God. In other words, an absolute ruler is necessary to keep the people safe from chaos, with that duty solely ordained by God. Hobbes also explains why he named his book Leviathan in chapter 28 of Punishments and Rewards, where he says he took inspiration from the last two verses of the 41st chapter of the book of Job to describe what human nature under the reign of a sovereign should look like, stating, there is nothing else so fearless anywhere on earth. Of all the creatures, it is the proudest. It is the king of beasts. However, we must also caution against the idea that Thomas Hobbes used this book from a theological perspective. Political historian Dr. Quentin Skinner argues that in his work, The Reason and Rhetoric under the Philosophy of Hobbes, that Hobbes focused primarily on writing on a more humanist approach to his works, using the clarifications on key parts of Leviathan to summarize the subject matter of moral science is a knowledge of civil duties, and thus that in speaking of moral science, he is speaking of politics. The Devon and Exeter Institute also analyzes Leviathan's frontispiece. The top of the frontispiece cites chapter 41, verse 33 of the book of Job through the placement of the verses varying on each verse of the Bible, however. The Devon Exeter Institution also argues that the frontispiece and illustration before the book's title is not new for 17th century books. In fact, it may offer a visual and metaphorical interpretation of the central idea of the book. With that, the frontispiece provides a visual summary of what Hobbes meant by Leviathan. The imagery of religion, weaponry, and royalty, which suggests that supporting arguments or topics that Thomas Hobbes is willing to discuss in support of his works, are nonetheless the upper illustration shows what shows the Hobbesian Leviathan, where the people merge into one king bearing a sword and crozier. Hobbes's Leviathan shows a philosophy of collaboration under the sovereign that embodies state power to protect all from chaos. The Devon Exeter Institution draws similar conclusions to this by quoting Part 1, Chapter 16 of Leviathan. With that knowledge, we know that Leviathan is an argument for authority as a tool of order, with religious arguments being rhetorical or instrumental. The Leviathan also poses religious and artistic significance. Returning to the New Living Translation of the Bible in the book of Job in chapter 41, it describes the Leviathan as having crocodile limbs, a large frame, impenetrable and double-layered scales, enormous jaws with intimidating teeth, bright red eyes, sneezing and breathing out bright fire, a strong neck, a heart as strong as stone, sharp scales on its belly, and making the seas boil in its presence. Regardless of biblical description, we see how the Leviathan is portrayed differently throughout history. Art historian Boris Kaimovich expands in his creative history of Leviathans, not just in the Bible but also in the Talmud. Kaimovich cites one of the early illustrations of the Leviathan on an illuminated manuscript from the 1236 Ambrosian Bible, as well as vault paintings from the Landshut Synagogue in 1935, being one of the latest in his paper. With both of them being depicted as a fish coiled into a circle, Kaimovich observes similarities despite differences and variations over time, stating, surveying the 800-year history of depicting Leviathan coiled into a circle provides strong evidence for the sustainability of the artistic tradition. Christians like Gustave Doré also took creative liberties in depicting the Leviathan. One of Dory's projects involved illustrating every verse of the Bible, with one of them displaying the Leviathan in the book of Isaiah, chapter 27, verse 1. In Dory's illustration, we see similarities of the Leviathan described in the book of Job, yet with some deviations as well, such as having wings and the Leviathan recoiling in fear before God, suggesting that only God can only destroy Leviathan. With these creative liberties of the Leviathan, also involving cultural connections worldwide, something that Steve Wheeler argues is that there are parallels between Western and Japanese depictions of sea monsters. Here, Steve Wheeler supports this argument by using William Blake's The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, which depicts the Leviathan, clarifying that by the time Blake used the Leviathan, the French Revolution, and not long after the Gordon riots occurred in London. Wheeler also cites Utagawa Kuniyoshi's Tamamori being pursued by the dragon as an example of another sea monster in art. Unlike Blake, Kuniyoshi witnessed a famine, economic strife, and political instability. Although both artists are from different regions, both cultures arguably use sea monsters to embody social issues. Wheeler associates this with Jungian psychoanalysis, saying that the image of the Leviathan or dragon forms a symbol of humanity's collective unconsciousness, a representation of anxiety and fear of an uncertain future. With that, the Leviathan diversifying in appearance, it embodies both size and fear, maintaining its context. One recent example is an illustration of the Leviathan from the video game Subnautica. Its artist Alex Rees illustrated the Leviathan by maintaining some of its historical and biblical attributes, such as teeth from the Book of Job, the elongated body from the Gustave Doré, and the fish-like appearance from Kaimovic's analysis of leviathans. With these variations, the leviathan maintains its large and intimidating appearance throughout history. Here are some of the visual examples that's from the previous slide. On the top left, we have the Ambrosian Bible of the Leviathan. Top center is the Leviathan from the Launch of the Synagogue. Top right is the Gustave Doré Leviathan. Bottom left would be the Marriage of Heaven and Hell. The center right would be the Utagawa Tamamori's Sea Dragon, which serves as a Leviathan, and Alex Rees's Leviathan in the bottom right. Now we come to today, where my interpretations of the Leviathan will be illustrated. Much like those in the past, the process I did with all three parts of the triptych was to directly apply the pencil sketch into the canvas for a rough draft of the illustration, and then apply micron pen inko over the sketch, with the assistance of an eraser to help the ink stand out more. Each canvas is about 8 inches wide and 10 inches tall. Here we have the Hobbesian Leviathan as depicted by me. Here we have this based off the quote, the procuration of the safety of the people, to which obliged by the law and nature to render an account thereof to God. That's my base inspiration. And here are some illustrations to it. The people distant from the main body fighting one another or in a state of panic, it resembles that state of nature, which serves as all against all, even upon themselves. Next, the people closer to the main body race to an organized from the feet up to a uniform body to fulfill their part of the social contract, serving as part of the main government body. The body then forms as a sovereign, who bears a cloak shielding the people, assembling into the body from chaos. The sovereign also holds a fasces as an armed wing of control. The fasces, although historically known for its fascism, is also a Roman symbol for order and strength through unity, especially in a militaristic context. And lastly, the head held high with the crown would be the sovereign himself, possibly serving as under God, rhetorically speaking, as he looks up. Here, the Leviathan is depicted as close to biblical accuracy as I could understand it, as seen in the 41st chapter of the book of Job. The features will be highlighted as quoted. I want to emphasize the tremendous strength of the crocodile's limbs and throughout its enormous frame. Who can strip off its hide, and who can penetrate its double-layer armor? Who can pry open its jaws, for its teeth are terrible. The overlapping scales on its back make a shield. They are close together so no air can get between them. They lock together so nothing can penetrate them. When it sneezes, it flashes light. Its eyes are like the red of dawn. Fire and sparks leap from its mouth. Smoke steams from its nostrils like the steam from a boiling pot on a fire of dry rushes. Yes, the breath would kindle coals, for flames shoot from its mouth, its tremendous strength in its neck strikes terror wherever it goes. Its flesh is hard and firm, not soft and fat. Its heart is as hard as a rock, as hard as a millstone, and when it rises, the mighty are afraid, gripped by terror. No sword can stop it, nor spear, nor dart, nor pointed shaft. To the crocodile, iron is nothing but straw, and bronze is rotten wood. Arrows cannot make it flee. Stones shot from a sling are ineffective as straw. Clubs do no good, and it laughs at the swish of javelins. Its belly is covered with scales as sharp as glass. They tear up the ground as it drags it through the mud. The crocodile makes the water boil with its commotion. It churns the depths. The water glistens in its wake, and one could think that the sea had turned white. As for the Leviathan in its circular shape, that is designed as a nod to Jewish depictions of a Leviathan coiled into a circle, as highlighted by Boris Kaimovich. Gills and fins were also applied into the illustration for an aquatic appearance. And lastly, we have the synthesis of the Leviathan. The Hobbesian messaging of the Leviathan from its previously stated quote in chapter 30, page 242, is depicted with the crossed sword and scepter, which also serves as a nod to the sword and crozier from the frontispiece. The Leviathan also coils around the sword and scepter as my rendition of the biblically accurate Leviathan. With the two interpretations merged in one, it plays with Steve Wheeler's use of Jungian psychoanalysis to identify the underlying social concerns. With this, the Leviathan coiled around the sword and scepter signifies the social fears of rising authoritarianism and the wars that come with. And lastly is our conclusion. The Leviathan is more than a massive beast, for the scale of its influence has also impacted history. What we have learned here is that there are many interpretations of what the Leviathan is. If we speak about a Leviathan in the philosophical sense, it is a theory that society must avoid chaos by organizing and providing an absolute ruler as ordained by God. If we talk about the Leviathan in a biblical sense, it is a beast so powerful that only God can destroy it. If we talk about the Leviathan through the lens of art history, it is a being that embodies both fear and size, recognized at any place and at any time. This sea monster has done more than portray intimidating images for thousands of years. It has ingrained itself into the depth of the human psyche. That is my capstone project. I hope you enjoy.